right, we got one. All right, how about operations? Anyone kind of running behind the scenes? Well, how many of us engineers have built an agent? Show of hands. Who has an agent in production? All right, we've got a few. Great. Well, Yvonne is here with Daytona, and they are going to make it easier for us to build our agents. Let's hear it for Yvonne.
All right, I had to cut this down because we have 15 minutes, correct? Is the timer going? Start, perfect. All right, so some people are building agents, great. Some of the problems, there's a lot, and I have to cut out, but some of the problems that with agents are there's a lot of things they actually can't do if you don't give them the tools to do that. And so the quick explanation I'll go through, basically most agents, so think your ChatGPT or Claude, whatever, most of them look like this. The user directs the agent directs the LLM, and it gives feedback, and then that goes back and forth. And there's only so much this can do. And so one of the examples of I like to use for tooling, if anyone listened to my talk here last time, sorry, it's the same talk, just shorter. Basically for the example I give is if you ask ChatGPT right now to divide or to give the percentage difference of two numbers, so 153 and 246, the way it's going to solve it is it's going to actually think about it and write it out as we would in high school or whatever. It's not going to pull out a calculator app, which doesn't make sense for a bunch of reasons, right? Because it can get it wrong, it's pretty slow, and it uses a bit of the context, and none of that is optimal. What we really need is for agents to have access to tools to solve these things, and in this case would be the agent calls a calculator app instead of trying to do math one-on-one. That doesn't make sense. And so one of the tools that AI coding agents basically need, or what is one of the tools, one of the ones that we do anyway, is runnability, so the ability to run code. Right now, if you give an agent the task to write code, it can write it out. If you tell it to run it and it doesn't have access to a runtime, it cannot run, evaluate, see if it works, doesn't work, try again, and loop. The example is, even if today you're working with Cursor, I assume most of you are, or Windsurf or whatever, it will look at the files and suggest things, but it can't actually spin up a machine to run what it suggests to see the output to evaluate if it's actually any good. You have to work with it, right? And there's a lot of reasons for that. What's interesting is that quite recently, when was this, AI Engineer Summit in New York, I think like 2 months ago or whatever, basically on the stage, both OpenAI and Anthropic came out with their new definitions of what an AI agent is, and both of them included either runtime and or environment. Different words, same thing. Basically, an agent needs a place to run things. You can think about it as giving an agent an actual laptop so they can do things. And so when we were building Daytona, we were thinking about what are the requirements to build such a product. And so number one, it has to be programmatic, basically a machine interface, APIs. Any environment that you give it has to be isolated, it has to work at scale, it has to be insanely fast. And we have to give it a bunch of tools to work with inside this machine. You're not going to give them like an empty Docker container. And so, basically, introduction to me, I co-founded Daytona. Before this, I also co-founded a company called Code Anywhere. The very first cloud IDE in 2009, which most of you are really young, probably were not coding at that time, probably. I'm not going to ask how old anyone is, but we've been building infrastructure for humans and now for agents for a pretty long time. And so Daytona is basically a secure elastic infrastructure for running AI-generated code. We take care of all the infra, secure it super fast. You basically import, you have an SDK, sandbox, equal Daytona.create, and it's up, super fast. So what Daytona does, it has a programmatic interface for your agent to spin up a machine or multiple machines, but also when the machine is spun up, there's a bunch of tools inside which the agent can use natively. So process and code execution, I'm not gonna go through all of these, file operations like create a file, set the permissions right inside of a file, Git operations, LSP. Basically, you can think about if you give an agent any machine and you could say, here's a command, it has to type it into the terminal, it has to parse the output, figure it out. With something like Daytona, there's basically an API call to open the terminal, then the agent sends a string to Daytona will run the command and send back the output. So it's always exact, it's always deterministic. The agent doesn't have to figure things out. And so the idea is that your agent spends less tokens and gets a higher quality output of what it wants to achieve. I'm gonna give you, actually this is way faster than I thought. So I'm gonna do just a little demo of how this actually looks like in real life. So this is the Daytona dashboard. I have two machines basically running, but here, hold up, I have to